Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
Hello, I'm Michael Seaman of the Brampton Heritage Board, and welcome to Brampton Memories of a Small Town. I'm here in the City of Brampton's historic Bouvet House for the first in a series of programs we'll be bringing to you about the history of Brampton and some of its fine old heritage buildings. We'll be looking at these homes and other structures which are of particular architectural styles and are representative of important trends and activities in the history of Brampton over the years. To be our guides through this history, we'll be talking to a number of Bramptonians about the many interesting features and stories associated with these buildings. It's hoped that this program will stimulate a greater awareness of the richness and diversity of the history and architecture in Brampton, and perhaps will bring back a few fun memories for those of you who remember Brampton when it was a small town. In today's program, we're going to take a brief look at the history and architecture of Brampton, and we'll discuss how the city and groups such as the Brampton Heritage Board are striving to increase awareness of and conserve our most significant heritage resources. I'm joined now by three people who each play an important role in the conservation of Brampton's heritage. Mayor Peter Robertson, Marissa Williams, the chairperson of the Brampton Heritage Board, and Diana Saltel, the Brampton Heritage Planner with the City of Brampton. Mayor Robertson, although compared to many places in the world, Brampton is a fairly new community. It does have quite an interesting history, doesn't it?
Certainly does. We could go way back to the Mississauga Indians. They're not the people that sit around the council table with us at the region, but the original native peoples here. And certainly the pioneer families. Many farms are still active in the city of Brampton, and it's part of our heritage. The buildings in the old downtown area, whether it's an industrial building or some of the beautiful homes and shops, remind us of our heritage. The railway station is now the GO station, and it's still a landmark in our community. The feeling of our community that relates to the heritage of the flowers, once known as Flower Town or Flower City. The rose that is embedded in the floor of City Hall in the foyer reminds us of that part of our heritage. And I'm sure the parks that are named after some of the pioneer families in the community, which is a tradition that we've started in Brampton. I'd say that the architecture is quite significant. If you stood at the middle of Mississauga and looked up to the big glass buildings and on a windy street, there's something that's charming and warm and personal in comparison when you stand at the four corners of Brampton. Mm-hmm. The old churches, the red brick buildings that are still there, and we're going to build upon that architectural heritage to make a very special place in the downtown over the next few years.
Marissa, as someone who's dedicated a great deal of their time as a volunteer on the Brampton Heritage Board, what do you see as the key features of Brampton's heritage?
Well, I think the City of Brampton has a tremendous, rich resource of heritage features. And I think the way I look at heritage is it's quite expansive. I look at it from the point of the tangible, things that you can touch and see, and the intangible. Some of the things that I'm talking about in the tangible forms would be the architectural houses, industrial heritage, such as the railway that we had recently designated as a National Historic Site, the GO train station, as the Mayor had suggested. We have villages like the Churchville Heritage Conservation District, which has recently become a designated area. In terms of intangible features that are heritage related, I would say that would be the oral history that we have. Memories and reminiscences of people who remember a certain feature or a certain event that happened in the city. All those things are very, very important, and I think they're all related to our understanding of our community.
Mayor Robertson, with the Canada 125 celebrations last year, there seemed to be a greater awareness of our past. How can conservation and recognition of our heritage be of benefit to all Bramptonians?
Well, it's an intangible. It's one of the unrenewable resources that are here in our city. Our heritage gives us a sense of pride, maybe in a personal way a sense of our roots or our beginnings that are important. No doubt urban design is part of that. And someday, although we don't think of it yet, heritage is an attraction for tourism. And so if we build on our heritage, I think it will add to the potential of the tourist industry coming to Brampton. Certainly just the style of life, we call it lifestyle. Heritage works into our lifestyle as well.
How is the City of Brampton involved in promoting recognition and conservation of our heritage?
From the community base, the leadership comes from our Heritage Board, and that's certainly important. Without those volunteers keeping alive the flame and the interest in heritage, preservation of traditions and buildings, etc., we wouldn't have the background and the heritage that we have today. This building we're in today that is owned by the City of Brampton. It was the Bovaird House was a gift, very generous gift from the Bovaird family. Some of the heritage villages are starting to pick up the feeling that we should preserve them. The residents should preserve them. Churchville comes to mind as a village with a heritage background. I'm hoping some of the streets in the downtown will eventually become designated as a heritage community or heritage district, which would mean that they have some sense of preservation for the future. So that designation of a home, a special building, is a legal process that is involved, and perhaps your show can get into describing that in a little more detail. I guess our museum in town, if you go by the old jail on Wellington Street, right near City Hall, that is certainly part of the description of our heritage. I guess across the road from that, Gage Park has remained the same with the beautiful old trees for many years, and the band shell in the middle. We've added a little wrinkle with the skating track around it for the winter time, but generally the heritage is both natural and man-made.
What is the Brampton Heritage Board?
Well, we're all volunteers. We've been appointed by council, City Council, and we work under the mandate of the Ontario Heritage Act. What we do, the volunteers come from a various variety of professions and have different levels of expertise. Some of them are architects, we have some lawyers, we have historians, we have the general public. We try to represent everyone. And actually that gives us a good basis of information, and anyone who has any interest in history and in architecture, they could come and ask for some advice from us. That's the other reason why we're here. We advise council, that is our mandate under the Ontario Heritage Act, advise council on historic and any item related to heritage, to give them the best advice that we possibly can.
What is heritage designation?
Heritage designation is a portion of the Act, of the Ontario Heritage Act, which allows City Council to determine which properties are significant in a historic and architectural way. What it entails is that a bylaw is passed by City Council, and that bylaw is attached to the land title of the property.
How are designated properties protected?
Well, once the property's been identified and council's passed the bylaw for designation, what happens is it's a method of management. Anytime that a property owner applies for a building permit or any kind of permit, The Brampton Heritage Board is notified through the Brampton Heritage Planner at the city and is advised that there is an application for an alteration, possibly a demolition of the building. At this point, the committee would consult with the applicant and determine whether or not the alteration would affect any of the reasons why that property was significant, why the reasons for designation. Ordinarily, most of the changes that come forward are really minor, and they don't affect the reasons for designation. And actually, the process is one that a lot of property owners appreciate, because there could be a different way of making a change that would be sympathetic to the historic fabric of the building, but at the same time meet the property owner's needs.
You do try to be proactive in your designations rather than reactive most of the time. That is sort of the common misconception about the Heritage Board, I would think.
Yes, I think in the past the Heritage Board had this sort of public image that we sort of sat back and we waited for things to happen, and then we would react perhaps to a demolition. What we are trying to do now is taking a much more public relations orientation. We've developed our brochure, which is something that's very new for us.
Diana, you're the City of Brampton Heritage Planner. What is your role in heritage conservation, and how do urban planning and heritage work together?
I have a variety of duties and responsibilities at the city. As Heritage Planner, I help the Heritage Board in fulfilling their various objectives, which include designating properties, helping them with research. They have a number of public awareness objectives that they're very interested. This program is one, and publishing various brochures. They're actually right now working on a walking tour brochure of downtown Brampton, and we celebrate Heritage Days once a year, and helping them on their various projects. I'm also assist the Churchville Heritage Committee, which is a group out in Churchville. Marissa mentioned that we have one district, and there's a local group that meets out there, and I help them with their various projects on public awareness and applications that come in. And also as Heritage Planner, I try and keep accurate records of any properties. If someone's doing any research, I like to keep documentation and any for archival purposes. And also one of our objectives at the City of Brampton is to try and integrate heritage preservation with planning. I work in the planning department. And in trying to integrate the two, right now we have our official plan. We've included some heritage policies in that. We're doing a number of secondary plans around Brampton, and in that we will be doing heritage studies. By doing that, what we want to ensure is that when there's new development in Brampton, that heritage resources are first of all identified and known, and secondly, we try to reduce any negative impacts on them. And ensure that if there is new development, that development is sensitive to a resource, and where possible, resources are preserved. And that includes both built resources and archaeological resources, which we, in a lot of cases, don't know where they are. So it is tricky at times.
This concludes our introduction to heritage. We'll be right back in a few minutes. We'll be looking at one of Brampton's interesting heritage buildings.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
We are Rogers Community 10 Brampton.
Brampton, Ontario. To residents today of Canada's 15th largest city, it is a bustling municipality of almost 200,000 people, where sprawling suburbs, high-rise apartments and shopping malls are the dominant features of the landscape. Hidden within this city, however, is the heart of a small town, the flower town of Canada to be exact. Situated in the valley of the Etobicoke Creek, Brampton has a long and storied history. The first people in the area were the Iroquois Indians. In the early 1700s, the territory was taken over by the Mississaugas, an arm of the great Algonquin nation. The Mississaugas were a nomadic people who found the forests and rivers of Peel County abundant with fish and game. The era of European settlement dates back to the 1820s. Surveyors of the time described the area as low, swampy, and covered with dense hardwood forests. But this description did not deter the early settlers, who were predominantly of British origin, from establishing a settlement here. Among the first British settlers were John and Mary Elliot, who arrived from Brampton, Cumberland, England, to stake their claim in this new land. Mr. Elliot purchased his first tract of land from Samuel Kenny on the east side of Ontario Street, south of Queen Street, for $100. He then began to clear the land and lay out the streets for a town. Martin Salisbury opened a tavern in 1822 on high ground at the north end of Main Street. Another tavern was erected in 1834 by William Bluffy and stood on the northeast corner of Main and Queen Streets. The early settlement grew around Bluffy's tavern, and the area soon became known as Bluffy's Corners. Also in 1834, William Lawson arrived in the area. He had been a close friend of John Elliot in their hometown in Brampton, England, and he was an ardent follower of the primitive Methodist faith. It disturbed both men to have their new town named after a tavern, and they soon moved to have the area renamed after their hometown, Brampton. By 1837, John Elliot had cleared half of his land and began farming. Together with William Lawson, he had also helped to establish Brampton as the backwoods capital of primitive Methodism. The population at this time was only 18, yet many people came from the surrounding rural areas to listen to Mr. Lawson preach on Sundays. In the year 1853, Brampton was incorporated as a village and had grown to 78 residents. The population was shortly to receive a further boost after two prominent citizens, John Lynch and George Wright, negotiated for the Grand Trunk Railway to pass through the town. George Wright was one of Brampton's most colourful figures. Of Irish descent and a prominent Orangeman, he was an ardent Anglican and a generous supporter, providing the property for the second Christ Church not far from his home, the castle. Built with funds from the sale of his property to the railway in 1856, the castle was Brampton's grandest residence. In this century, it became the boyhood home of William Grenville, also known as Bill, Davis, the Ontario Premier in the 1970s and early 80s. Wright was an active figure in politics, serving as councillor and reeve of Chincoosea Township, and from 1851 to 1854 was a Member of Parliament. The Grand Trunk Railway arrived in 1856, providing a forward thrust in the form of two large industries, the Haggett Foundry, manufacturers of farm machinery and stoves, and the Dale Estate Nurseries, which became famous for the propagation of hybrid roses and orchids. Many more nurseries arrived in later years to become the largest employers in the community until the 1940s. The presence of this garden industry gave Brampton its title, the Flower Town of Canada. The founder of Haggett Brothers, John Haggett, served as Brampton's first mayor from 1874 to 1877 and was another of Brampton's pioneer entrepreneurs. Born near Paisley in Scotland, he immigrated to the United States in 1839. He reached Brampton in 1849 and established the Haggett Brothers Foundry. This industry's importance in Brampton's growth and development cannot be underestimated. The foundry was the most important industry in Brampton from 1850 to 1890, as it supplied farm machinery to a rapidly growing agricultural Western Canada. Haggett's importance can be seen in his still standing but much altered mansion, Haggett Lee, on Elizabeth Street North. Another boost to the economic fortunes of Brampton came in the 1860s. In the spring of 1865, after much debate, Brampton was named the county town of Peel. As a direct result of this, Peel County Courthouse and jail were erected on Wellington Street East in 1867. Economically, Brampton was now seen as the centre of activity in Peel, and many businesses came to locate here. On March 29, 1873, Brampton was incorporated as a town with a population of 2,090. Its location in the centre of one of the best grain-producing counties in Ontario established Brampton as a bustling agricultural market and transport depot. By the late 1800s, Brampton boasted a number of schools and fine churches, and 8 hotels, 2 railways, and a busy retail district. From the days of Bluffy's Corners, downtown Brampton was always the centre of activity in the town. Until 1952, it was also an area of some natural beauty, with the Etobicoke Creek meandering its way through the central core. The creek was channeled through culverts underneath some buildings and would wind its way through and around others. The attractive scene of the Etobicoke Creek appearing in the downtown was certainly a great amenity. That is, until it flooded, which was not an infrequent occurrence. Throughout its history, Brampton experienced numerous spring floods, the result of which would see the downtown area engulfed in water and ice. Damage was invariably extensive, and on several occasions the raging creek claimed human life. There had always been talk of action to prevent the flooding, but little was ever done. 1948, however, proved to be the last straw. By far the worst flood in its history, Brampton was inundated with 6 feet of water on March 16th of that year. A sudden spring thaw and ice breakup culminated in a major catastrophe which caused nearly $500,000 damage. In response to this disaster, a plan was put into effect to divert the creek away from the downtown. On July 5, 1952, Premier Leslie Frost officially opened the diversion channel, fulfilling the dream which Bramptonians had sought for over a century. As a result of the prosperity of the late 1800s, Brampton's downtown experienced a building boom. Although most have been demolished today, much of the business district consisted of 2- and 3-story structures in the Italianate style, creating a uniform appearance which made for a very attractive downtown. Situated among the ecclesiastical spires of the town skyline sits the distinctive clock tower of the old stone Dominion building. Now designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, this building is probably one of the most significant heritage structures in the city. Situated where it is, not far from the site of Buffy's Tavern, it seemed the appropriate place to begin our tour of Brampton's heritage buildings.
The Dominion building is interesting architecturally for several major key points. Compositionally, it's quite well structured. The ground floor is articulated by very large circular arches. These arches are knitted together by a band of pellet molding which wraps from along the south side right around to a third of the west elevation. In fact, the entire building is faced with limestone. The base itself is quite thicker, just below those ground floor arches. The second floor arches are considerably smaller and yet are still as well articulated as the ground floor arches. They terminate on skew blocks and are also tied together by pellet molding. They also turn the corner and return along the west elevation. The third floor has much smaller square windows, and it is from the third floor that the center portion of the building, the tower itself, springs. It is this center tower for which this building is well known in Brampton. However, few people know that the main building itself was built in 1889, and the tower that everybody associates with the building now was built in 1914. It is obviously not part of the original design of the building. The other fascinating thing about the building is that the architect obviously knew that the corner on the southwest side would become more active than the other parts of the building. It is for this reason that he returns the prominent south-facing limestone around the corner, around that lane, and makes a very beautiful corner entrance to the main floor function.
Hello, we're now in Gage Park. In 1973, coinciding with the town of Brampton's centennial celebrations, the old clock was removed from the Dominion building, and the bell from the clock, which as you can see here, was placed in this memorial in the park. The bell was cast in 1913 by John Taylor and Sons in Loughborough, Leicestershire, England. Were it not for the efforts of conservationists, the old town bell may have been all that would have been remaining of the Dominion building today. In 1978, however, after much debate about the future of the building was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, ensuring its preservation for future generations. Further, the facade of the building, or the historic Credit Valley sandstone, was given a heritage conservation easement, which means that any future owners of the property can't alter at all the historic facade of the building. This concludes our first show for Brampton Memories of a Small Town. I'd like to thank our guests, and I hope you'll join me again next week when we'll be looking around some of Brampton's most interesting heritage homes, and for the rest of the series when we'll be touring throughout Brampton and its heritage.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
To comment on the preceding program, please call the response line 24 hours a day at 456-0860. Your comments are appreciated.